Chapter 2. Be a Mirror. Everybody, subscribe. Yeah. September 30th, 1993. A brisk autumn morning, around 8:30, two masked bank robbers trigger an alarm as they storm into the Chase Manhattan Bank at 7th Avenue and Carroll Street in Brooklyn. There are only two female tellers and a male security guard inside. The robbers crack the unarmed 60-year-old security guard across the skull with a .357, drag him to the men's room, and lock him inside. One of the tellers gets the same pistol whipping treatment. Then, one of the robbers turns to the other teller, puts the barrel in her mouth, and pulls the trigger. Click goes the empty chamber. "Next one is real," says the robber. "Now open the vault." A bank robbery with hostages happens all the time in the movies, but it had been almost 20 years since there'd been one of these standoffs in New York, the city with more hostage negotiation jobs than any other jurisdiction in the country. And this happened to be my very first feet to the fire, in your face hostage job. I had been training for about a year and a half in hostage negotiations, but I hadn't had a chance to use my new skills. For me, 1993 had already been a very busy and incredible ride. Working on the FBI's Joint Terrorism Task Force, I had been the co-case agent in an investigation that thwarted a plot to set off bombs in the Holland and Lincoln tunnels, the United Nations, and 26 Federal Plaza, the home of the FBI in New York City. We broke it up just as terrorists were mixing bombs in a safe house. The plotters were associated with an Egyptian cell that had ties to the Blind Sheik, who later would be found guilty of masterminding the plot that we uncovered. You might think a bank robbery would be small potatoes after we busted up a terrorist plot, but by then I had already come to realize that negotiation would be my lifelong passion. I was eager to put my new skills to the test, and besides, there was nothing small about this situation. When we got the call, my colleague Charlie Buden and I raced to the scene, bailed out of his black Crown Victoria, and made our way to the command post. The whole cavalry showed up for this one. NYPD, FBI, SWAT! All the muscle and savvy of law enforcement up against the knee-jerk desperation of a couple of bank robbers seemingly in over their heads. New York police, behind a wall of blue and white trucks and patrol cars, had set up across the street inside another bank. SWAT team members, peering through rifle scopes from the roofs of nearby brownstone buildings, had their weapons trained on the bank's front and rear doors. Assumptions blind, hypothesis guide. Good negotiators, going in, know they have to be ready for possible surprises. Great negotiators aim to use their skills to reveal the surprises they are certain exist. Experience will have taught them that they are best served by holding multiple hypotheses about the situation, about the counterpart's wants, about a whole array of variables, in their mind at the same time. Present and alert in the moment, they use all the new information that comes their way to test and winnow true hypotheses from false ones. In negotiation, each new psychological insight or additional piece of information revealed heralds a step forward and allows one to discard one hypothesis in favor of another. You should engage the process with a mindset of discovery. Your goal at the outset is to extract and observe as much information as possible, which, by the way, is one of the reasons that really smart people often have trouble being negotiators. They're so smart, they think they don't have anything to discover. Too often, people find it easier just to stick with what they believe. Using what they've heard or their own biases, they often make assumptions about others even before meeting them. They even ignore their own perceptions to make them conform to foregone conclusions. These assumptions muck up our perceptual windows onto the world, showing us an unchanging, often flawed, version of the situation. Great negotiators are able to question the assumptions that the rest of the involved players accept on faith or in arrogance, and thus remain more emotionally open to all possibilities and more intellectually agile to a fluid situation. Unfortunately, back in 1993, I was far from great. Everyone thought the crisis would be over quickly. The bank robbers had little choice but to surrender. Or so we thought. We actually started the day with intelligence that the bank robbers wanted to surrender. Little did we know that was a ruse their ringleader planted to buy time. And throughout the day, he constantly referred to the influence the other 4 bank robbers exerted on him. I hadn't yet learned to be aware of a counterpart's overuse of personal pronouns. We, they, or me, I. The less important he makes himself, the more important he probably is, and vice versa. We would later find out there was only one other bank robber and he had been tricked into the robbery. Actually, 3 robbers, if you counted the getaway driver who got away before we even entered the scene. The lead hostage taker was running his own counterintelligence operation, feeding us all kinds of misinformation. He wanted us to think he had a bunch of co-conspirators with him from a number of different countries. He also wanted us to think that his partners were much more volatile and dangerous than he was. Looking back, of course, his game plan was clear. He wanted to confuse us as much as he could until he could figure a way out. He would constantly tell us that he wasn't in charge and that every decision was the responsibility of the other guys. He would indicate that he was scared, or at least a little tentative, when we asked him to pass along certain information. And yet, he always spoke with a voice of complete calm and absolute confidence. It was a reminder to my colleagues and me that until you know what you're dealing with, you don't know what you're dealing with.